You know, it isn't easy booking new vehicles to feature here on Test Drive. Some of the ones that I think will do insanely well end up not having any views at all, and then the ones that I just kind of brush off end up being very popular. That's one of the reasons why I decided to book this 2018 Cadillac XT5 Platinum. At first I thought, yeah, it's a Cadillac, I'm going to enjoy driving it, but my expectations were not low, but just meh, because it's an SUV. But boy, did I manage my expectations poorly. Not only is this a fantastic crossover SUV and one that actually makes me excited to drive, but this is insanely quiet on the road. I'm actually super impressed with this vehicle, and we've only had it for a couple days here. Now we're going to be showing you everything about this crossover SUV, taking it on a drive and going on a road test, and talking about why this might be one of the best luxury SUVs we've driven to date, and why it should be something that you consider if you're in the market for a $75,000 vehicle. When I say that I didn't manage my expectations properly for the XT5, it's not that I didn't think it would be a great car. In fact, if you've watched any of our recent episodes of Test Drive on the Cadillacs we've featured, I've been thoroughly impressed with the vehicles so far. In fact, Cadillac went from being a brand I wasn't really too interested in before starting our new car segment here at the beginning of 2018 to being one of the best vehicles that we featured this year. Now, why is it that my expectations weren't properly managed here? Well, it's an SUV. For the most part, I'm not overly excited by them. They're not overly quick or sporty, and they really just get the job done. But it wasn't until I started driving this vehicle and finally looking at some of the features that it had to offer as I was on the road that I realized truly how spectacular the 2018 XT5 is. Now, up front, we do have a pretty similar front end that we've seen on other Cadillacs so far. They use this sweeping, almost waterfall-like headlight design. I really do like it. In terms of safety tech on the front, you have everything you would expect. Active cruise control, forward collision alert, lane keep assist, blind spot monitoring, rear cross traffic alert, and a backup camera. It also comes with a 360-degree camera system, which we've seen in other models from Cadillac, so that wasn't too much of a surprise. Aside from that, you have power folding mirrors, panoramic sunroof, and access to all four doors with keyless entry. Now, around back, things do get pretty nice. And I say that not because there's a killer feature back here that you won't find on any other vehicle, but rather they've taken the CT6's design language that was designed for a sedan and incorporated it quite well into a crossover SUV. I'm really impressed that it doesn't look overly gargantuan, it's not overly bulky, it actually looks quite elegant. Now, I do like the back of it. It works pretty well. You can open the trunk as you would expect a luxury SUV to be able to do. And one thing that I found was interesting here is you do have a movable rack, a little bar on the back here. I don't quite know what its purpose is. It's the first vehicle I've seen that actually has something like this. It has worked out actually for me, believe it or not, by being able to put items that are smaller in the trunk lined up against this rack and then closing the door. They stay in position a little bit better than they would if the trunk was open. Now, you can fold the seats back from here, and I'd say that there is pretty good space. Now, I like the exterior look of this car, especially in this blue. It looks pretty good. But why I'm so impressed with this really has to start with the interior of the vehicle. So let's jump on in and see why I'm overly impressed with this crossover SUV. Now, the first thing I'm going to do, because it is kind of warm in here, especially with the door open, where the camera's sitting, and the air conditioning not being on, I'm going to roll down the window. Just listen. I don't even know if you could hear that on the microphone. It was so quiet. I've noticed that the interior of this vehicle is so quiet. Now, this is the highest trim that Cadillac offers for the XT5. It is the Platinum, so you'd expect it to be a little bit over the top. And I'll admit that if you were probably driving something that isn't the Platinum trim, it wouldn't feel as nice. Everything is either leather or MicroSuede. It's fantastic in here. You got wood trim, little bits around the center console here, along your steering wheel, door cards, looks really good. Everything else is wrapped in leather, including the dashboard. And it's kind of similar to the Cadillac Escalade. It's a little firm on the top, but you can feel the softness a little bit further down, and then MicroSuede everywhere else that would probably be plastic on other trims. The headliner is also completely MicroSuede. It looks great. And also, which we talk about sometimes when it comes up, the build quality is certainly great with this vehicle. All the door cards line up perfectly. All the seams are perfect. There's really no issues with the way that this car is put together. Everything is so solid that it really does feel like a proper luxury car, and you would expect that for the $75,000 price point. Now you do get a lot of tech and a lot of features for that price as well. You do have front dual zone climate control, and there's also a third zone in the back. You do have Cadillac's video rear view camera, which we've seen on the Escalade and CT6. You can wash the camera from the back because this is an SUV model. They don't do it on the CT6, but on the SUVs you can clean the camera on the back, which is great in the winter. Panoramic sunroof up top lets in tons of light, and rear seat space is great as well. I mean, we didn't really talk about it up here, but I'm super comfortable with the heated or ventilated front seats. And in the back, since you do have tri-zone climate control, the back passengers can set whatever they want. There is outboard heated seats, and again, space is good. Now there is the rear entertainment package on this vehicle. Costs quite a bit, especially considering they're using DVD players built into the headrests. They're pretty much the same ones we saw on the Cadillac Escalade. We have been testing them and they do work. So if you do have kids and you're going on a long trip and they really do need to be entertained, then it's good to be able to throw a DVD in there. It is important for us to take it on the road and talk about not only how it drives, performs, and handles, but the uniqueness of its all-wheel drive control system. So we're going to be taking this on the road now, talking about it, and going over everything else you need to know if you're in the market for this $75,000 Cadillac XT5. What do you know? They've paved this road. Let's put the car into sport mode. Not that it makes a huge difference. We're going from a dig. Tire squeal on a crossover SUV. Who would have thought that? And there we go, 100. That was actually not bad. That's the thing. I mean, as you probably know, I'm not a huge fan of crossovers. They serve a purpose for a lot of buyers. But for me, I always prefer driving a sedan. Except for this. First off, I want to acknowledge that while this car is fantastic on the inside, it really does blend in. And you do see a lot of the XT5s on the road. In fact, it is Cadillac's best-selling vehicle, far more than things like the Escalade or even the ATS. Now, I don't mind blending in with this car. I mean, I always do like to stand out. And if you watch any of the episodes we've done before, you'll know that I do like standing out in my vehicles. But something like this, I'm actually happy with because it really does blend in. Something like an X5, you'd blend into unless it were an X5M, in which case you'd stand out a little bit more. So this car does a good job doing that, but it is important to note. If you're looking at a smooth, quiet ride, I'm really impressed with it. And I don't know if you can tell, but I can tell that the audio is much better on this than it has been on most of the other vehicles we've done recently. I'm driving, we were at 100 kilometers an hour, we're now down to about 75, and I'm sure you can hear me with very little road noise and background noise than you normally would on pretty much any other vehicle. That's because the sound insulation in this car is great. I mean, it helps too that you have some materials in here that can help to absorb some of the sound, such as the MicroSuede headliner, along with the dashboard parts here. So it does help to insulate a little bit of the sound with less echo and reverb, but also because the glass is insulated and they put better insulation into the rest of the vehicle components for the cabin here, it makes a difference. They do hear the engine a little bit. That's my only sort of concern, I'd say. But aside from that, it gets the job done. Now, the roads here aren't what we would consider to be typical Quebec roads. They're actually relatively smooth. But even on some of the rougher stuff, this car really does perform phenomenally well. In fact, it almost feels like you're driving on a cloud. Not as much as something like an S-Class. So, I mean, you're not getting S-Class quality or maybe Mercedes GLS quality when it comes to the ride, but it really is good. I'm impressed with it. You don't feel as much of the road as you normally would. When you go around a corner, you really are adapted to it. You're not going to be thrown into any of the corners. You give it some gas like we're doing now, you almost don't feel it. It really is a refined experience. And I'm sure that you can find it in other vehicles. It's not exclusive to Cadillac, but I just like the way that it all gets put together. Part of the reason why this car is so interesting to me is because of how it performs on the road. And one of those reasons is its all-wheel drive system. You know, most all-wheel drive systems will just divert power to all four wheels when you start, and then it'll kick back over to front-wheel drive. This car, you can configure it whether you want it to be in front wheel or all-wheel drive. And for example, we are in front-wheel drive right now. It helps with the fuel economy. We've averaged 10.4 liters per 100 kilometers. It helps with the cylinder deactivation of this LGX engine. But the other thing about this all-wheel drive system is it uses a twin-clutch rear differential. So what that means is when you're in rough conditions and the vehicle detects maybe you're losing traction on one of the back wheels, it can divert all of the power to one rear wheel. So instead of spinning all the tires and getting yourself stuck even more, it potentially can help you get out of a sticky situation. Not only works with the rear tires, the front ones will still spin at the same speed if needed, but the fact that it can divert all the power to one wheel is quite interesting. The only problem with this car is the auto start-stop. It's absolutely terrible. You cannot override it, and often you have to really learn how the system works, because we've driven a number of other vehicles where it at least gives you a second or two between stopping and actually turning off the vehicle. But with this one, not so much. So what happens is when you come to a stop sign and you stop the vehicle like you're supposed to, it turns off the vehicle. But what ends up happening with me is because I stop the vehicle and then I'm good to go, it's turning itself off as I'm starting it back up, and it really creates this junky experience. So please, GM, put a button to turn it off. I know the reason behind it. I get your logic. We sell 100,000 XT5s and they all have auto start stop. We're saving the planet. We're going green. GM, save the universe. Yeah, but it sucks as an experience. So please allow people to be able to turn it off if they want. Give the consumers the choice, because my God, like, it's just, I almost don't want to stop anymore because I know it's going to turn off the engine and it's just going to feel so clunky. So please, GM, just do it. Do it!
This 2018 Cadillac XT5 Platinum was a genuinely excellent vehicle, and one that I miss already, despite dropping it off only hours ago from the time I'm writing this. We've been accused of working on behalf of manufacturers when we like a car, but the reality is, if a vehicle is great, we're going to talk about it. And if a vehicle is junk, which some of them have been this year on TestDrive, you'll know about it. But there's almost nothing to fault with this crossover. Like other Cadillacs we've driven, it has a lot to like and very little to dislike. The interior trim of the Platinum model is over the top with its leather and MicroSuede finishes. The rest of the XT5's tech worked great also, like the color head-up display and tri-zone climate. Rear seat entertainment was also simple to use, allowing our daughter to stay entertained during our 1,400-kilometer week. Fuel economy also got a lot better the more we drove, getting down to 9.3 liters per 100 kilometers after a medium-distance road trip to and from Ottawa over the weekend. And finally, the thing that kept me coming back to this XT5 was its overall look. Not as daunting as an Escalade, it straddles the line between blending in and showing off. This formula is working out exceptionally well for GM, and I suspect that their XT4 compact crossover is going to explode in popularity. Dislikes are few and far between. The auto start-stop is one of the experience-ruining features that this Cadillac has. Add a button to disable it and we're in business. We also found the backup camera's resolution to be low, but that seems to be a growing trend these days, with a lot of other manufacturers getting dinged for this very fault. And me being a nitpicker, the keyless entry is too sensitive, an issue we experienced during our second week with the Cadillac CT6. If you get out of the car to fuel up, the key just barely exits the invisible fence which automatically locks the car, which, if you're like us at 11 p.m. at night coming back from a 700-kilometer road trip with a sleeping kid, will inadvertently set off the car's internal motion sensor and theft alarm. But that's it. My expectations for this XT5 going into this week were meh, but coming out I was a believer. This is how a true luxury crossover should be. The interior, exterior, and performance. This is what I expected from the Alfa Romeo Stelvio. Yet all I got was plastic and cheapness. Thanks for watching this episode of Test Drive Spotlight on the 2018 Cadillac XT5 Platinum. If your budget was $75,000 Canadian, would you be looking at this? A base model BMW X5 xDrive 35i, a well-equipped Mercedes-Benz GLE 400 4MATIC, or a fully loaded Jaguar F-Pace 30T portfolio? Let us know in the comments below. We're always surprised to hear what you're the most interested in. Until next time, take care.